You're watching the Daily Climate Show on Sky News. On today's programme, as energy bills for many are set to rise again, we look at the cost of fossil fuels versus renewable power. The debate over culling beavers in Scotland. Campaigners say they improve biodiversity and flood management. For some farmers, they're destroying precious land. And the sailing competition where teams race for more than just a win on the water. Hello and welcome to the UK's only daily climate news show. Now, the cost of energy for millions of families will be going up this autumn after the regulator Ofgem announced the energy price cap will increase. It means bills rising by as much as £139 a year. Why? Well, it's mainly to do with the wholesale cost of fuel, specifically fossil fuels. Well, the cost of gas is increasing. Surging fossil fuel prices are driving up inflation for consumers, leading to that rise in the price cap. And that matters because we're still using a significant amount of gas in our electricity supply. And you can see that's the blue line here, staying fairly consistent over the last 20 years or so. But Great Britain's electricity system is undergoing a period of significant change as we transition from fossil fuels to renewables. Now, there's been a marked increase in wind and solar, that's shown by the green line here, while the use of coal, that's the white line, has dropped off almost entirely. So that's the long-term trend. Now, if we look in more detail at the first quarter of this year and last year, we can see that most of our renewable energy came from bioenergy, offshore and offshore. That's those first three blocks. Solar and hydro both account for around 2%. That's the yellow and white. Now, overall, in the first quarter of 2021, renewables provided just over 41% of our electricity, the third highest quarterly share on record. But will the move to more renewable energy actually be any better for consumers? Well, our correspondent Dan Whitehead joins me now. So what does this mean for consumers, Dan?
Well, initially for consumers, this really will hit their pockets. We're down in Devon and we've been speaking to families right across the county today who from October are braced to feel the impact of the rise in the energy cap. We've been with the Jackson family in Paignton in Devon and they've told us they are going to have to change their lifestyle given the amount that their bill is now going to go up by.
So top of the list is obviously got to pay all the bills first, like gas, electric, council tax, water bills, all that sort of thing. Then after that, it's all your luxuries to, give your family a bit of fun, a bit of entertainment at the end of the day. We like our holidays, we like restaurants, we like going to the cinema. But obviously, in the back of the mind, there's going to be less money for that now.
The advice, of course, at the minute is that consumers can simply switch to a better deal. But the long-term future in terms of reducing our energy bills is going to be renewable and green energy. A recent report from the International Renewable Energy Agency found that around 2/3 of the new wind and solar farms that were built right around the world just last year are capable of creating cheaper energy than the cheapest, newest coal plants that are being created. So we've moved away from knowing that simply renewable energy is better for the environment, but also now it can create cheaper energy. So that will be the future for people to reduce their bills. But for the time being, across the UK, people will simply have to shop around and switch. They can, of course, select to get an energy provider that is green, that comes from renewable energy. Whether or not that actually is reflected in how much they pay each month, probably not yet. That's going to be a bit more time.
So how do we make that transition from fossil fuels to renewables? Well, let's bring in Nicola Shaw, UK President of the National Grid. Welcome to you. First of all, what are the cost implications for individuals of this transition from fossil fuels to renewables?
The good news is we're already well into the transition. We're way ahead of many countries. And in terms of cost, it's a complicated mixture of the good news, again, is that renewable energy is really free once we get it. Once the infrastructure is there, we can then use the power of the sun and the power of the wind to generate the electricity. So it's free at the point of having made the infrastructure investment. We pay for the infrastructure over a long period. So overall, we think that it is a really good investment for consumers in the UK.
And how are we doing with that infrastructure? How much renewable capacity do we have at the moment to meet a rise in demand?
We're doing really well. As I said, we're amongst the leading countries in the world, particularly in wind. We're hitting records in our delivery of electricity from offshore wind at the moment. In April, we hit a particular record, and we know that about 4.5 million homes in the UK are already powered by renewable energy. But there is more to do, and we will probably have to double the amount of electricity we're going to use by 2050, just because we'll have more things that are connected to electricity, which means quite a lot more investment, particularly in the next decade, really. We want to see a big step change in the amount of offshore wind-generated electricity coming onshore.
And it's interesting you talked about the next decade because the Prime Minister has made a pledge, hasn't he, that every home can be powered by wind power within that time frame. Is that really possible?
So a big pledge. It's number one pledge in his 10-point plan, the government's 10-point plan, was to deliver 40 gigawatts of offshore wind by 2030. And at the moment, we have just over 10 gigawatts. So you can see a big step up. And that is feasible, but we've got to get going. And there's a lot to do. So you first have to get planning permission. You have to then get the financing in place, and then you have to do the construction.
Nicola Shaw, thanks very much indeed. And don't forget, you can see a more detailed breakdown of the real-time power mix in Great Britain anytime you like on our website, skynews.com/climate. Wildfires are continuing to burn in parts of the United States, with a newly ignited fire destroying at least 50 homes in Northern California. The river fire, which started on Wednesday, has charred over 2,400 acres in Nevada and Placer counties. Authorities are warning that California could be on track to suffer the worst fire season on record. Well, that comes as new pictures show the extent of devastation in the gold rush town of Greenville. The Dixie Fire, which has burned for 3 weeks now, destroyed 75% of the historic Californian town. Among the damaged buildings were saloons, the town museum, and over 100 homes. And in Greece, thousands of people have been forced to leave their homes in Athens after strong winds caused wildfires there to spread rapidly. The fires have been worsened by a heat dome, a high-pressure bubble trapping heat within an area. It's seen parts of the country reach 47 degrees, and meteorologists warn climate change will make these extreme weather events more frequent. In today's other climate news, COP26 President Alok Sharma has been accused of hypocrisy after it was revealed he's flown to 30 countries in just 7 months. The government says face-to-face meetings are key to successful negotiations at the climate change conference being held in Glasgow later this year. But Green Party peer Jenny Jones criticised the flights as excessive, saying the minister should have used trains for some trips instead. France's highest court has fined the government there £8.4 million for failing to improve air quality. 4 years ago, ministers were ordered to reduce levels of nitrogen dioxide in line with European standards, but the court ruled insufficient measures have been taken. The court has threatened to issue a similar fine every 6 months until air pollution targets are met. And wine production in France could slump by as much as 30% this year, its lowest level in decades. Extreme weather, made worse by climate change, meant vineyards were hit by severe spring frosts and torrential rainfall. Champagne production will also be cut by around half after harvests were destroyed by mildew fungus caused by the fluctuating weather. Scotland's highest civil court is due to issue a ruling soon on the right to kill beavers. Rewilding charity Trees for Life brought a case against Nature Scot for allowing farmers to kill the wild creatures, arguing control licences are being issued too freely. The charity says beavers are vital to improving biodiversity and boosting natural flood management. But for farmers, they can seriously damage land, as Sky's James Matthews reports.
Beavers are being shot in parts of Scotland where they were released without authorisation and where they disturb prime agricultural land.
I feel extremely frustrated.
Louise Ramsey has them on her land. Licences to kill, she says, are issued too readily.
When they build their dams, they bury tons and tons of waterlogged wood. All of this is sequestering carbon. The other thing is that climate change, as we know, causes droughts and floods. Beavers hold the water table steady through both droughts and floods. Holding on to the water on the land in a time of flood is really critical for everybody and everything, for all these creatures and for humans.
But for the dam builder, there's a dam buster. The people who shoot the beavers are typically farmers and landowners.
They're recognised as being a biodiversity benefit, and in some areas that's absolutely the case, there's no doubt about that. However, where they're causing serious agricultural damage, we need to be able to control them.
The Scottish Government agency Nature Scot insists it only issues licences to kill if it's satisfied it's the only option. Campaigners disagree and say that alternatives aren't fully considered. They hope that if a judge agrees with them, fewer beavers will be shot and more will be relocated from parts of the country where they're not welcome to parts where they are. James Matthews, Sky News, Perthshire.
Now, with all the excitement of the Olympics, there's lots of focus on how to make sport more sustainable. One event already trying to do their bit is Sail GP. Teams in the international sailing competition don't only race in the water, but on sustainability too. The Impact League runs alongside the racing leaderboard, with teams rewarded for the actions they take to reduce their overall carbon footprint. And we asked none other than Great Britain's sailing legend Sir Ben Ainslie to explain more.
The Impact League it's really a race for the teams. We race on the water for the trophy, if you like, but we're also racing for the Impact League. You know, we're all competitive animals out there racing, you know, to try and win on the water, but now we're racing to try and save the planet, you know, to try and save our oceans. We take it seriously. We take it really seriously. You know, the teams are already, you know, out there monitoring what each other are doing in terms of the sustainability approach. You know, we're going to need to see that level of change across all sports and across all society if we're going to meet the targets that we need to get on top of this global issue. We're pushing seriously hard from within our own sport and within Sail GP, and we expect the same from other sports.
Well, that's everything from us for today, but don't forget to check out the weekly climate show to find out more about the devastating wildfires in Turkey and what caused them. And you can find that on the Sky News Snapchat channel. And in this week's episode of Climate Cast, can video games encourage us to go green? That's out wherever you normally get your podcasts from now. Thanks for watching. See you next week.